Winning the war was only level 1. Now we must learn how to live together.
In Zataro.com's look at the aftermath of the 7 Years' War, we are focusing on exactly what the initial conditions of surrender meant for the French living under British rule. Picture this. You've just battled through years of this epic global conflict, the 7 Years' War, and you won. The confetti is flying, the victory music is playing. But here's the thing. Winning the war was just level 1. The real challenge, the final boss level, is what happens next. The British had just scored this massive victory, and now they were in control of a huge territory called New France. It was kind of like a giant corporate takeover, but with cannons, or like winning the world's biggest gaming tournament and suddenly becoming the admin for the entire server. They were in charge now. So, what was the plan? This is where things get complicated. The British didn't just win some empty land on a map. They inherited an entire society, about 70,000 people, the Canadians, who spoke French, were Roman Catholic, and had their own unique laws and traditions. For the British, this was a massive decision. Do you try to rule by force, which is exhausting and expensive, or do you figure out a way to make it all work together? To avoid total chaos, the French actually came to the table with a plan. They handed the British a document that basically said, "Look, you're the new bosses. We get it. But if you want this whole thing to work without a constant rebellion on your hands, you need to follow our rulebook." It was a smart move to try to make the transition peaceful. The official name for this rulebook is the Articles of Capitulation. It sounds formal and maybe even boring, but think of it as the terms and conditions of the surrender. It was the document the French put together to lay out all the ground rules for this massive takeover. And it wasn't just about protecting the French army. The goal was way bigger, protecting the everyday people living there, the Canadians, the Acadians, and the First Nations communities too. It was all about making sure this new setup could actually be stable in the long run. So what was actually in this rulebook? The Articles of Capitulation boiled down to 3 core demands, 3 absolute non-negotiables the French insisted on to protect their entire way of life. First, property. The French made it clear the British couldn't just roll in and start kicking people out of their homes or taking their land. Private property had to be respected. This was not a winner-take-all situation. Second, religion. The French were mostly Roman Catholic, and the British were Protestant. That was a massive cultural divide. So the French demanded the right to keep practicing their faith freely without forced conversion. And third, their general rights as citizens. This was all about fair treatment. Even under British rule, the French people were not to be treated like a conquered enemy, but as subjects with recognized rights in the new system. So, to recap the big 3, treat people fairly, don't touch their property, and let them practice their religion. That was the foundation for a peaceful transition. With the rulebook in place, someone had to enforce it. The British needed someone on the ground, a new community admin, to manage the transition. That person was General James Murray. He was put in charge of Quebec City right after the takeover, handed the incredibly difficult job of making this new reality work. General Murray had 2 gigantic tasks. First, he had to ensure his own British soldiers respected the Articles of Capitulation, property, religion, and rights. Second, he had to rebuild Quebec City, which had been seriously damaged during the war. Talk about a tough first day at the office. It's important to remember this wasn't just a friendly suggestion from the French. It was a formal deal. The British officially agreed to these terms. They signed on the dotted line and promised to uphold this new arrangement. Which leaves us with a big question. They had a formal agreement, a whole rule book for how to coexist. But is a piece of paper actually enough? Is a legal document powerful enough to merge 2 completely different cultures and build a working society from the ashes of war? That's the real test. And that wraps up today's session, where we unpacked the critical first steps of the French experience under British command.